Nothing was too good for little Miss Splendid. She lived in a huge house, surrounded by large gardens. She bathed in a gold bath, and she dined off silver plates. Oh, she was splendid. At least, she thought so.
"Soup, my lady?"
asked the butler.
"Ooh, just caviar today, Hargreaves."
"Very good, my lady."
Little Miss Splendid thought a lot of herself. In fact, she thought about nothing else. "Good morning, ma'am," said the head gardener.
"Good morning,
"Cardwell, ma'am." "Good morning, ma'am," said the under gardener.
Good morning,
"Cully, ma'am."
Cully."
"Good morning, ma'am. Will you need your car today?" said the chauffeur.
"Not today, Williams."
That day, while taking a stroll around her gardens, little Miss Splendid came upon a small door in one of the walls. She'd never noticed it before.
"No, I wonder what's through here.
She found herself on a road. Along came Mr. Small, out for a short walk. "Good morning." Little Miss Splendid stuck her nose in the air even higher and walked past him as if he wasn't there.
What a common little man.
She came to a bus stop. Mr. Happy and Mr. Daydream were waiting for a bus into town. "Hello, who are you?"
I am Splendid.
"Oh, I'm Happy. Happy to meet you. This is my friend, Mr. Daydream. Are you going to catch the bus?"
Me? The bus? Never. I have never, ever in the whole of my life travelled on a bus. You have to sit next to people on buses, and that would never do.
Oh. Mr. Happy couldn't think of anything to say. Miss Splendid walked off with her nose very high in the air. Miss Splendid arrived in town. She looked at herself in all the shop windows as she walked down the street.
Splendid, splendid. I must say I do look absolutely splendid.
And then something caught her eye. There in the middle of the window of a hat shop was a hat. Not just a hat, but a hat and a half. The most magnificent, sumptuous, desirable, gorgeous, spectacular, amazing, splendid hat you've ever seen. Little Miss Splendid marched into the shop.
Shop! Shop!
She snapped her fingers, and a saleslady hurried to her side.
Good morning, madame. Can I help you?
I wish to try on the hat in the window.
This one, madame?
Yes. Oh, magnificent. I'll take it. Don't bother to wrap it. I'll wear it.
But don't you want to know how much it costs?
Costs? Costs? I never discuss money matters. Put it on my account.
Thank you, madame. Goodbye.
Little Miss Splendid stood on the pavement and held up her hand.
Taxi! Taxi! Take me home.
Little Miss Splendid went to get in the taxi, but of course she couldn't. Her new hat was much too large to fit through the taxi door.
Driver, you should purchase yourself a larger taxi. In the meantime, I shall have to walk.
"All right, please yourself, duck. Cheerio."
Perhaps it's better to walk so that everyone has the chance to admire my magnificent new hat.
But then it happened. It started to rain. And the trouble was, the more it started to rain, the more it rained. And the trouble was, the more it rained, the more Miss Splendid got wet. And the trouble was, the wetter she got, the wetter her hat got. What a sorry sight. Don't you agree? The bus, on its return journey from town, passed her. Mr. Happy and Mr. Daydream, on their way home, looked out of the window. Oh, I say, what a splendid sight. Splendid! chuckled Mr. Daydream. Miss Splendid, looking anything but splendid, arrived home. However, after a hot bath in her gold bath and after a boiled egg in her gold egg cup, eaten with a silver spoon, she felt much better. In fact, later on, she spent an extremely pleasant evening looking at... Well, now, what do you think she spent all evening looking at? No, not a magazine.
Splendid.
No, not television.
Splendid.
Not a book.
Splendid.
Herself. In the mirror.
Oh, I do look splendid.
Splendid, splendid, amazing, quite superb. I know you cannot find the words. There's never been a little miss like me.
Little Miss Shy just couldn't help it. Being shy, that is. She was terribly, desperately shy. She was so shy it hurt, which is what they call painfully shy. If at any time anyone at all said anything at all to her, she blushed like a beetroot. "Hello, seen any birds about?" said a worm, popping up. She lived all alone in a little house quite a long way from where you live. In fact, quite a long way from where anyone lives. Thimble Cottage. Little Miss Shy was so shy that she seldom left her little cottage to go to town. So she grew her own food in the garden of Thimble Cottage and lived a very quiet life. "Hello, having a good dig? It's deafening down here," said the worm.
Dear. Oh, dear. Oh, dear.
And Little Miss Shy ran into the house. The next day, she was having breakfast in the kitchen. Went the door. Little Miss Shy dived under the table in terror. But it was only the postman knocking at the door. The postman outside knocked again, loudly. Little Miss Shy, under the table, put her hands over her ears and shut her eyes. Anybody home? Anybody home? Well, I don't know. She must be out. The postman pushed the letter he was carrying through the letterbox and walked away. Little Miss Shy waited and waited and waited, long after the sound of his footsteps had died away. And then she waited some more. In fact, she spent most of that day under her kitchen table. It was dark by the time Little Miss Shy dared to come out. There it was, on the doormat, the very first letter she'd ever had in the whole of her life. She opened it very cautiously.
Oh, it's from Mr. Funny.
"You are invited," said the letter, "to a party on Saturday at 3 o'clock. It's going to be fun, fun, fun." Little Miss Shy was horrified.
Fun?
She looked at the letter again.
I can't go. I can't. There'll be people there. People.
In the whole wide world, there was absolutely nothing that frightened Little Miss Shy as much as the thought of people. She worried about it all night long. But the following morning, she had made a decision.
go. It would not be polite to refuse.
But 5 minutes later, she changed her mind.
Oh, I'll have to refuse.
And 5 minutes later, she changed her mind back again.
I'll have to go.
But 5 minutes later, guess what happened?
I can't.
That's right.
I can't go.
She didn't sleep much that night at all. The following morning was Friday. Miss Shy awoke with a smile. She was going to the party.
Right. I'm going. Yes, I've definitely decided I'm going. I'm really going. I really am.
That Friday, little Miss Shy changed her mind 144 times. And that's how many 5 minutes there are in a day. She was going to the party.
No.
No, she wasn't going to the party.
Oh, yes.
She was going. She wasn't. No, she wasn't. She wasn't. It was a very long day. And that Friday night was even worse than Thursday night. She didn't sleep a wink.
Can't sleep.
Not even half a wink. Saturday morning came and went. Saturday lunchtime came and went. And little Miss Shy just couldn't eat a thing.
Can't eat my dinner.
1 o'clock in the afternoon came and went. Then 3 o'clock, the party time, came and went.
Can't.
But poor little miss didn't.
Oh, I can't.
She couldn't. She just sat there, and a tear rolled down her cheek.
Should have gone. Oh, I wish I'd gone.
4 o'clock came, and there was a loud knock on the door. Little Miss Shy hid behind a chair. The door opened, and in walked Mr. Funny. Ha-ha! Hello! I knew you wouldn't come, so I've come to take you to the party. Little Miss Shy blushed and blushed and blushed.
Oh, no, I couldn't. No,
Come on, yes, come on. You'll enjoy it, won't you? There, come on, off we go. And he marched the blushing little lady off to his party. Everybody was there. Little Miss Shy didn't feel very well.
I don't feel very well.
She began to feel her face getting redder,
Have some cake.
said Mr. Greenleaf.
That's kind.
Save some for me, though.
He added. Mr. Tickle offered her 2 glasses of lemonade in a roundabout sort of way. Mr. Mischief made her jump with a noisy party squeaker. And she dropped her lemonade all over Mr. Small.
Oh dear, I'm sorry you're wet.
Oh, don't mention it. As a matter of fact, he found it most refreshing in that hot party room and tasty. Mr. Dizzy gave her a lovely party hat, and little Miss Shy began to feel better.
I feel better now.
Everybody talked to her, and everybody was very nice, and gradually, the longer the party lasted, bit by bit, little by little, eventually, guess what happened? She stopped blushing, and she actually started enjoying herself. Ha-ha! I told you so! It's quite painless, really, isn't it? Once you get used to it, let yourself go. What? Laughed Mr. Funny, weaving his way through the party crowd towards Miss Shy. Little Miss Shy nodded and giggled. She was having the time of her life, and only blushing a bit. And do you know who she met at the party? Mr. Quiet. I used to be shy like you, he said.
You never were. Would you like to come to Thimble Cottage for tea tomorrow?
Oh, me? Tea? Tomorrow? Replied Mr. Quiet, blushing like a whole sackful of beetroots. And then he fainted.
Come to a party, come to a dance. Come out and play with us, just take a chance. Little Miss Shy, you seem so afraid. Try it before it's too late. troubles. We're helpful, tiny, neat, quite silly, scrappy. She's little Miss Sunshine.
I'm fussy and greedy.
In
the bad, splendid, impossible team. All friends together, the little Miss and Mr. Men. All friends together, round and round we go. Back to back and side by side and on with the show.
Early one morning in summer, little Miss Magic awoke in the bedroom of Abracadabra Cottage, which was where she lived. She yawned a yawn and got out of bed. She went to the bathroom to clean her teeth.
Squeeze.
She said to the tube of toothpaste. And guess what? The tube of toothpaste jumped up and squeezed itself onto Little Miss Magic's toothbrush. Honestly, Little Miss Magic isn't called Little Miss Magic for nothing. When she tells something to do something, it does it. She went downstairs to the kitchen.
Boil.
She said to the kettle, and it did.
Toast.
She said to the toaster.
Spread.
She said to the knife, and the knife jumped up and spread some butter onto the toast.
Pour.
She said to the coffee, and she sat down to breakfast. Don't you wish you could make things do things like that? She was enjoying a second cup of coffee when there was a knock at the door.
Open.
She said to the door, and it did. There stood Mr. Happy, looking exactly the opposite.
Oh, you don't look your usual self.
Remarked Little Miss Magic.
What's the matter?
Everything, replied Mr. Happy.
Come in and tell me all about it. Would you like a cup of coffee?
Yes, please, said Mr. Happy.
Pour.
She said to the coffee pot.
Sugar.
2, please. 2 lumps jumped out of the sugar bowl and plopped into the cup.
Stir.
And a spoon stirred Mr. Happy's coffee.
Now, what is it?
Well, it's Mr. Tickle, replied Mr. Happy. He's become absolutely impossible.
What do you mean?
Asked Little Miss Magic. Well, he used to go around tickling people every now and then. But now he's going around tickling people all the time. He sighed. Little Miss Magic looked at him.
Oh, it can't be as bad as that. Cheer up.
And of course he did.
Come along, we'll go and see Mr. Tickle together. Open.
She said to the door.
After you.
Said Little Miss Magic to Mr. Happy, and off they set from Abracadabra Cottage. Mr. Tickle was in full cry. What a Monday morning he was having. He tickled Mr. Mean until he moaned. He tickled Mr. Greedy until he groaned. He tickled Little Miss Sunshine until she shivered. He tickled Mr. Quiet until he quivered. He tickled Little Miss Plump until she pleaded, and Little Miss Shy until she sobbed. Not to mention the postman, a policeman, the doctor, 3 dogs, 2 cats, and a worm. Ha ha! Cried Mr. Tickle as he spied Little Miss Magic and Mr. Happy. Anyone for tickles? And he rushed up to them, reaching out those extraordinarily long arms of his, with those particularly ticklish fingers on the ends of them. Little Miss Magic looked at Mr. Happy.
I see what you mean.
And winked. She pointed at Mr. Tickle's extraordinarily long right arm.
Shrink,
she said, and then she pointed to Mr. Tickle's extraordinarily long left arm.
Shrink.
And as you remember, when Little Miss Magic tells something to do something, it does it. Mr. Tickle's arms were suddenly not extraordinarily long. They were extraordinarily ordinary. That's not fair, he cried. You've spoiled my fun. Well, it might have been fun for you, remarked Mr. Happy, but it wasn't much fun for anybody else,
Come and see me tomorrow.
said little Miss Magic to Mr. Tickle.
There.
She said to Mr. Happy,
Happy now?
and Mr. Happy smiled that famous smile of his. Oh, I'll say, come on, I'll buy you an ice cream. And off they went to find an ice cream van,
Ding dong.
said Miss Magic. Oh, 2 raspberry ripples, said Mr. Happy, laughing. On Tuesday, Mr. Tickle went round to Abracadabra Cottage. He knocked at the door,
Open.
and of course the door opened by itself.
Oh, hello, Mr. Tickle. Come in. I expect you'd like me to make your arms long again.
Oh, yes, please.
Very well.
Mr. Tickle's face lit up.
On one condition.
Oh. His face fell.
You're only allowed 1 tickle a day.
1 tickle a day? Well, that's not much.
Promise.
Mr. Tickle sighed. Oh, promise.
Grow.
And both Mr. Tickle's arms grew back to their original long length.
Now don't forget, 1 tickle a day, or else.
Oh. Mr. Tickle went out through the door.
Goodbye.
She said to him.
Shut.
She said, and of course it did. Mr. Tickle stood outside little Miss Magic's cottage. Oh, well, he thought, 1 tickle a day is better than no tickles a day. It was then that he saw one of the downstairs windows of Abracadabra Cottage was open. 1 tickle a day, he thought, and a small smile came to his face. 1 tickle a day. And on that Tuesday morning, as one of those extraordinarily long arms reached in through the open window of Abracadabra Cottage, the small smile on the face of Mr. Tickle turned into a giant grin. 1 tickle a day! Little Miss Tiny was extremely small, not very tall at all. She was so very tiny, she didn't live in a house. Do you know where she did live? In a mouse hole, in the dining room of Home Farm. She made the mouse hole quite comfortable, really, and luckily there weren't any mice, because the farm cat had chased them all away. The trouble was, because she was so tiny, nobody knew she lived there. Nobody noticed her, not even the farmer and his wife. So there she lived, all alone. She was rather lonely and rather sad.
Oh, dear. I wish I had someone to talk to.
One day, she was feeling so lonely she decided to be very brave and go out for a walk.
Come on, Tiny, best foot forward.
Out of a mouse hole she came. She crept across the dining room, and then she pushed the door open and crept into the hall. Now, to little Miss Tiny, the hall looked as big as a field.
Oh, my goodness.
And she scuttled across it to the back door of the farm. Luckily for her, there was a cat flap at the bottom of the door, and she squeezed herself through it onto the doorstep. It was all very exciting. There before her was the vast expanse of the farmyard, so she set out to explore it. As little Miss Tiny walked across the lawn, she came upon a hole. Suddenly, up popped a worm. Morning. Seen any birds about?
Oh, my shivering shoes, it's a monster.
Little Miss Tiny was terrified. She ran across the farmyard to hide, and she came to a door with a gap at the bottom and ducked in underneath. There, inside, was a pig. A large pig. And if you're as small as little Miss Tiny, a large pig looked very large indeed. Miss Tiny looked at the pig, and the pig looked at Miss Tiny. He grunted and moved closer to inspect this little person who'd entered his sty.
Oh, my trembling toes.
Miss Tiny shot out of the pigsty as fast as her little legs would carry her, which wasn't very fast because her legs were so very little. She stopped to catch her breath.
Oh, my knocking knees.
When she'd recovered her breath, she climbed up on a large stone to see if the pig had followed her. Fortunately, it hadn't.
Well, thank goodness for that.
But suddenly, the stone began to move.
Oh, chattering teeth, what's happening now?
Fierce, please! Move right along the bus, please! But it was only a harmless old snail. Little Miss Tiny jumped down and ran across the farmyard. She ran right round the back of the pigsty before she stopped. She leaned against the wall and put her hands over her eyes. And suddenly, she heard a noise. A very close noise. A sort of breathing noise. Very close indeed.
What's that?
She hardly dared take her hands away from her eyes. But when she did, she wished she hadn't. What do you think it was? There, right in front of her, looking at her with green eyes, Ginger, the farm cat. Oh, poor little Miss Tiny. Ginger grinned, showing his teeth.
Help! Help! Oh, it's a lion! Please, somebody help!
Little Miss Tiny shouted at the top of her voice. The trouble was, the top of little Miss Tiny's voice was not very loud. Ginger grinned another grin. Every day, Mr. Strong went to Home Farm to buy some eggs. He liked eggs, lots of them. And that particular day, he was walking home across the farmyard when he heard a very tiny squeak. Now, what was that? There it was again. It was coming from round the corner. He looked round the corner and he saw that Ginger had trapped poor little Miss Tiny.
Help! Oh, help! Please help!
Shoo, come on now, go away, cat. Mr. Strong picked up little Miss Tiny very gently. Hello. Who are you?
I'm Miss Tiny.
Yes, well, you are, aren't you? Well, if I was as tiny as you, I wouldn't go wandering around large farmyards.
But I'm so lonely, I wanted to find someone to talk to.
Oh, dear. Well, now, let's see if we can't find you some friends to talk to.
Thank you very much. That's very kind of you.
And now, every day, Mr. Strong collects little Miss Tiny and takes her off to see her friends. 3 days ago, he took her to see Mr. Funny, who told her so many jokes that she just couldn't stop laughing all day. And then, a couple of days ago, he took her to see Mr. Greedy, who told her what he usually had for his favourite breakfast. Toast, 2 slices, cornflakes, 1 whole packet, milk, 1 bottle, sugar, 1 bowlful, toast, 3 slices, eggs 3, boiled, of course, soft, toast 4 slices, butter 1 dishful, marmalade 1 pot.
That's much too much for tiny little me. I couldn't possibly eat all that.
Well, for you, divide by 100. Yesterday, Mr. Strong took her to see Mr. Silly, and Mr. Silly showed her how to stand on her head.
That's very silly.
Oh, yes, well, thank you. And guess who she met today? Somebody who's become a special little friend. Mr. Small. I never thought I'd ever meet anybody smaller than myself.
Just you wait till I grow up.
Oh, oh, I think, oh, jolly good. Oh, fine.